Bobby. Thanks.
That's what he's talking about.
Woo!
Hey, baby.
Ladies and gentlemen, Baby Breaker.
Woo! Listen, Boogie Woogie Man feel good.
He's going for that figure four. He's got the figure four.
Randy Macho Man Savage now steps into the ring.
Kill me! Kill me! Oh, yeah!
You trying to get in, because I think you had a pretty rough start. They brought you to that old, I think it was Gene Anderson was doing it.
Yes, I was again working security, and a friend of mine named Jimmy Cox, who was a Virginia Beach policeman, he took me backstage and introduced me to Gene Anderson, and I'd met like Greg Valentine and Ricky and different ones of the guys, but I mean the kayfabe was very strong back then. I mean, guys really protected the business, and even though they thought you had a potential, you know, they still very much protected your ability to transcend into the fraternity. You know, it was a very tight-knit group. And so anyway, they brought me into the cattle call session that they had in Charlotte. And it was kind of funny. I'd been I worked security in nightclubs, and I dealt with all kind of horrendous things. Longshoremen, Navy SEAL that was my manager. So I mean, I was really accustomed to a lot of physicality, a lot of really tough stuff. And I had just got this Doberman pinscher that was living with me in my apartment, and I was allergic to it, didn't know it. So my allergies were like off the hook, couldn't breathe. I mean, it was really fouled up, but I'm going to go down to this session. So I go down, and all of a sudden they have you doing a bajillion Hindu squats and push-ups and all this stuff. And I'll never forget Gene. Gene's in there barking out all the stuff, do this, blah, 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 blah. So we go through 30 minutes, 45 minutes or whatever of, what kind of shape you're in. And my respiratory's gone. I can't breathe. I'm just like, so I go outside and I sit down outside. They're trying to be rough and gruff, and I'm kind of beyond rough and gruff stuff. I mean, I'm streetwise. I've, done the things I do in the security world. And then I see Buzz Sawyer and I think Bob Roop and these guys start coming in, and they're going to, have us go wrestle after we've been working. We're blown sky high, and I'm sick on top of it. And Gene comes out, and I went out and I sat down on this little grassy knoll out there, and I said, I got to go get some air. Oh, no, trying to bully me around. And so Gene came out, and I was a pretty good sized guy even then. I was like 230, wasn't as big as I got later on. Gene comes out and grabs me by the hand and says, "Come, you need to get back in and grab me by the arm." And I said, "Oh, no. I said, if you want to see what I can do, I'm glad to show you what I can do. But so right now, you're not interested in seeing what I can do. You're trying to humiliate me because I'm blown up, I'm sick, and I'm tired, and you're not really interested in seeing what I'm capable of doing." I said, and then the other side of it is, you really don't want to make me mad like that because this isn't a game to me, okay? So I left, and I wrote him a nice letter afterwards, telling him I appreciated the opportunity and everything. But if that was the only way to get into the club, I was gonna have to retake a look at this, and it's funny because he kept the letter, and years later, as I come in as Magnum TA into the Mid-Atlantic, he had that letter and he said, "I remember you," and all that stuff. And I said, and I respected the protection because I did the same thing. For Bill Watts. I wrestled guys that wanted to get in the business, but we didn't go blow them up for 30 minutes. We got them in the ring. As a matter of fact, we were the ones blown up. It was usually after a TV taping, and we worked all day long and everything else, and then we had to go get in the ring with this guy that's jacked up to the moon to convince him he doesn't want to be a professional wrestler. He ain't got what it takes. So anyway, it was a good story. It was a good respect issue, but I didn't disrespect them. I was just trying to let them understand they didn't really know me either, and they didn't know what I was capable of or not, and I would give them an opportunity to see it sometime, and 3 years later, I march in there as their top babyface.
And you mentioned the guy by the name of Buzz Sawyer. I know he kind of took you and tried to to train you? I think you eventually did. Just kind of tell that story
Well,
real quick.
Buzz opened the door. Okay, Buzz, the only training I got, I worked out in the ring one time. One time, only time I ever got any training to be in professional wrestling, because Buzz was a kind of a interesting character. He took advantage of all kind of opportunities he got to make extra money, do things, and kind of lured me in through the back door to say, oh, I can get you in. And he said, I'm going out to Portland, and we'll go out there, and I'll get you started. And there was some money involved, and I don't want to go into that out of respect for the deceased. But anyway, I had to chase him down all the way to Portland is what it ended up doing. And he told Don I'd been working for Bill, and I had never been in the ring. And so we went down to the Sportatorium or whatever it was called there in Portland. It was a bowling alley, actually, where they filmed. And him and I and Princess Victoria and I think his little brother Brett, and we all went down the ring, and I learned how to tie up, how to hit the ropes, learned how to take a backdrop, all these things. And then one session, I was in the ring the next night on on their television show, worked with Buzz, and that's how I got in the business. I didn't know anything about anything, and learned the school of hard knocks every night.
That's kind of how it was back then. Yeah. I forgot to do it.
You write something in longhand and hand it to somebody in Mecklenburg High School, and they'll go, what's that?
Yeah, that's a shame too.
Yeah.
You ready? All right. No more stop. We'll
Okay.
get this done. All right. So let's skip ahead. You're with Mid-South. You're with Bill Watts. I guess you get a phone call from Dusty.
Well, let's back up just a touch, because it was two steps.
Okay.
Because really the Magnum TA piece and what prefaced me being able to come in the way I did was really important.
How did you get that name?
Andre the Giant, over breakfast, looked at me, and we'd become friends, met him in Portland, had a big car. So whoever had the big car drove Andre. But we actually established a friendship. So when he came to Florida, same thing. I was driving him around, we spent time together. But he'd watched me. By that time, I had about a year and a half under my belt. So I'd gone from being totally green, knowing nothing, to a guy with a lot of potential that was an unknown that could be turned into something. And he told me, he said, "You're ready for a break." And actually, I've been in the business 3 years. And he said, "You look kind of like that Tom Selleck guy on that Magnum PI show." He said, "You ought to be Magnum TA." And he just came up with it just like that. And he was going to take it to Vince and bring me to New York. Well, before he could do it, Ernie Ladd, who was coming in as like a star for Florida Championship Wrestling, he was a booker for Bill. He said, "Ooh, I'm going to get this guy," because Orndorff had just gone to New York. So they brought me there, and that's where I got to develop the Magnum TA persona, the character. Got a year and a half of working on top, and then the infamous call, Dusty in the middle of the night, saying, "The top spot's open here. Do you want it?" And putting Jim Crockett on the phone with me and saying, he said, I can't match for you in the way of a promise what you're making with Bill, because I was averaging $2,000 a week working on top in Mid-South. He said, "But I promise you, the top spot, all the opportunity goes with that, and I guarantee you'll never make less than $700. Well, that was huge, because the average guy on top was making about $400 a week back then. They were on their rear ends, and so I made the commitment to him. I said I would take the gamble and roll the dice and see what we could do, because I believed in Dusty, and also it was my opportunity. I'd circumnavigated the globe to come back to my home, Tidewater area, have a chance to perform in Norfolk Scope, and see where the chips may fall from there.
I imagine Bill Watts had a mouthful for you when you told him you were his top guy, and you want to share some of that?
I'll never forget it, because I first of all, I remember at the time I was married to a young lady named Tamara, and I remember telling her I was getting in the car to go off to a town, and so I didn't chicken out. I was telling her, when you see everybody tonight, tell them, I'm going. That's where I'm going. So I'd have to tell the booker, who would have to tell Bill, because Superstar Bill Dundee was the booker back then, and I didn't want. It was just tough. I knew that they were going to think I was nuts, because really I had just tapped into a gold mine there. I mean, we were selling out everything. We were running 2-3 towns a night, and selling out every place we went. And, you know, Mr. Wrestling 2 and I had a big angle there, worked with Ernie Ladd and a big angle. I mean, everything was really just, you know, getting ready to, you know, go to the next level even more for them. But something inside me told me there was a greater opportunity ahead of me. And this was before the Superstation deal, for all this stuff. I just had a gut feeling that if I could get there and help them take off the Mid-Atlantic, that it would go, you know, to the moon, and it did. But yeah, Bill browbeat me to death. I worked a 6-week notice for him. I put over everybody in the territory. I did every favor on the way out for people that had taken care of me on the way in. And, you know, he would tell everybody, you know, I can't believe, you know, what a dummy I was, you know, missing out on this great opportunities there. And, you know, he did it kind of tongue-in-cheek. But Bill was a type A personality guy, very in control of his business, very hand-on, very knowledgeable, huge, you know, mastermind of the game. He learned from Eddie Graham and then took that to the next level. So, you know, a lot of respect, learned a lot from Bill Watts. So you know, don't take that as a sour grapes thing. But yeah, he let me know that, you know, I was probably making a really bad move, and, you know, kind of the rest is history.
So you come here and talk about how bad the business really was, because people think it was booming the whole 80s, but it really wasn't. Just kind of tell the people, describe to the people what the business really was.
I mean, we were going to venues like Charleston, South Carolina, Greenville, all the traditional places, and they weren't, I mean, back then, Greensboro and Charlotte were not even doing any business, but we'd go to these smaller buildings, there'd be 200-300 people out there. And I mean, and wrestling in front of 200-300 people is a challenge. I did a lot of that in the early days in very small places, but you get in a big building with all that space, and of course, back in that day, it was a little bit better because all the house lights came down and all the focus was on the ring. But it was still a big empty feeling of void, and you really had to hone your skill to be able to captivate a small group of people, because you didn't have all that atmosphere going on.
And why do you think the crowd went from booming to this kind of 200, 300 people? I think I read Dusty somewhere said, like, all the talent kind of walked out on him. Is that what happened? Or
all the talent had walked out on the Mid-Atlantic?
Yeah, like Steamboat and Piper and
well,
those guys left.
Well, Steamboat was still here when I came. Piper was gone, Snuka was gone. Barry Windham had been brought in as the top guy. He had left because he quickly saw it wasn't going to support his expectations, and so, you know, there wasn't any Blackjack Mulligans or Big John Studs. They were all elsewhere and gone. So, you know, it needed a facelift. It needed a change. It needed a. I mean, Dusty was there. Nikita was there. Don Kernoodle was there. Sergeant Slaughter was there. But a lot of things that were kind of, you know, the young guys, the young lions, the Nikitas were so green they hadn't even had a chance to figure out who was on first and what was going on, you know. But you had a lot of veterans, Dick Slater, you know, guys that could work and could put on a great performance in the ring, but it wasn't captivating anybody's imagination. But the thing that turned the tide, hands down, besides the talent, was the opportunity that all of a sudden Dusty and I walk out of a hotel and we get a call from Jimmy, and he's just cut a deal to get us on the Superstation. And that changed the game almost overnight.
Do you know anything about that deal? What happened? How he got that?
All I was told was that they paid $1 million to get the slot. And of course, you know, back then, television was an avenue for us to advertise our product. We didn't give away main events. We used it totally to showcase our people, and that was the star maker. They used that as the star maker. They blasted me on the scene. It was like I came out of nowhere. I'd been in all these little territorial places that, yeah, people in different little places had seen Terry Allen first and then Magnum TA. But when I hit the Superstation and all of a sudden was worldwide, it was like, oh, this guy just poof, he came out of a, you know, black hole. When in reality, I had more matches under my belt than, you know, it'd take people 10 years today to accomplish what I was able to do in 3 years, because we were wrestling 7 days a week.
And that went everywhere, the TV TBS. I mean, TBS was a hot commodity back then.
Exactly.
For Georgia, and then when you guys got on, just kind of talk about that talent level that you guys had, because I know they brought in Rock and Roll Express and Midnight and you. And
Well, exactly. They started it out with immediately putting me in a head-to-head with Ric Flair, because he's our top guy, and they needed somebody to go against him, and that was the building block. And in a 1 month period of time, he and I wrestled like 19-hour draws in a month. Every night we'd go, and wherever we went, we were booked main event, and we were going an hour, and we were giving them the daggone match of a lifetime, a wrestling match, a competition, hardcore, just boom, 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 reestablishing the marquee that this was wrestling, and this was very physical, and we were markedly different than the WWE, who was more of an entertainment-based, circus-type atmosphere as compared to what we were doing. And so immediately that was put in place, and the business started coming up, started seeing it come up. Well, I was like the Pied Piper at that point, because I'd taken that big step off the end of that pier, and my old comrades, Ricky Morton, Robert Gibson, the Midnight Express, Terry Taylor, Buddy Landell, everybody that I had left followed suit. They said, "Oh, this is popping, this is the deal." And just slowly but surely, he surgically removed all the talent that had been in Mid-South, and what had made them successful, came over to the NWA. And then all of a sudden, we had a depth that an opening match on any given card at any night could have been a main event somewhere else on the same evening. We didn't have curtain jerkers. We didn't have little squash job matches going on. We had great matches from beginning to end every night, and it was phenomenal.
As a fan, I would say it's probably the best talent roster that's ever been assembled. How would you see that group of talent that was put together, that Dusty and them brought in and put together?
It was great talent. I mean, people like Manny Fernandez, of course, Wahoo was still here too. Guys that could go, veterans of hard-hitting action were here, and people that could do interviews and could talk and work this storyline, and it's where Nikita got his opportunity to really shine and to come out and get made the major heel, and then later the major babyface that he became, was because of that opportunity. And it was just, it was contagious. You got that much talent and that many people in a room that are oozing, just electricity and charisma, then everybody's pulling their game up every night. I mean, it's your desire to go out there and be the showstopper, be the best match of the night, and you got that many guys competing for that level of performance, the fans couldn't help but win.
Talk about Dusty Rhodes. What did you think of him as a booker? A lot of people say he's a creative genius, and then some people say he was kind of just hot shotter. But what's your thoughts?
No,
you had a good relationship with
yeah, I did, and Dusty, he always had a much bigger vision than any of his predecessors about where he saw the business going. I mean, he could have very easily, had he had the tools around him, been a much more competitive product to the WWE than he had made available to him. I mean, the Crockett organization didn't have the legs and didn't have the outside resources that were the expertise in marketing and reaching outside the box for resources and developing things. I mean, Dusty was like Cecil B. DeMille. I mean, he was envisioning a movie in his head. He was thinking of vignettes and specials and things to showcase talent that were like mini movies. And so he had this huge imagination, but didn't have the talents of the people that Vince had in production and whatnot to pull that all off, or to get the other avenues for revenue from the marketing things that we should have had to the degree that we should have had, because the talent level was there to support it, but it was just all happening so fast.
So I guess Crockett didn't have that infrastructure, that business infrastructure.
Well, no, we went from a small company that was basically struggling to all of a sudden we're doing I believe in '86, I may be wrong on this, but I think we did like 27 million in paid arena attendance in a year, and that was huge because this is before pay-per-view. So that's a lot of people sitting every 18 inches in an arena, filling them up, and sometimes we're running 1, 2, 3 shows in a night, and maxing all of them. So it was huge business, but then with that came expenses, came travel, came all these things, and again, that's a huge story in and of itself.
We'll get to that a little later on.
Okay.
Dusty was, like I said, a creative genius. He came up with Starrcade. What do you think of Starrcade? And then obviously we'll talk about a few of your matches with this Starrcade.
Well, Starrcade was our WrestleMania. Basically that was our big, huge event of the year. And again, we didn't have, pay-per-view didn't exist at that juncture in time, but they were doing what they call the simulcast, and we would run at Atlanta and Greensboro same night, and we'd have a live match going on in one venue, the other venue saw it on a big screen, and then switch back and forth. And it was a great concept. I think in 1986 when Tully and I had the I Quit match, I think that total event grossed like $600,000-700,000, which was huge for for that time in that era, again before pay-per-view. So the concept of doing a great big show and still running a market and not blowing off all your taking all the heat off all your heels or sacrificing your top baby faces at the same time, the creativity that took to continually capture the imagination. You couldn't totally satisfy everybody's wants or there'd be no need to come back. I mean, that was a real different time in the business because again, we were programming towns. We were doing things in a town to make people want to come back 2 weeks, 3 weeks, a month later to see the rematch or see what was going on next because of the things that happened there. So that was like I said, it was a different time. So to have the big show and again not lose everything that you'd worked for and just destroy some of your talent in the process and everything else was quite a challenge. And I think Dusty was smart enough to surround himself by creative people. I mean, he had JJ, he had Tully, he had Rick, myself, and different ones of us, Arn, all would sit and talk about things. And because we all wanted to be the best it could be too. So he would take creative input from the talent and then maybe put a tweak to it, put a little twist on it, whatever it took, and create it like that. But most of it got created driving down the road, drinking a beer and eating pork rinds, coming back from parts unknown, for the next show.
Let's talk about that Starrcade '86 I Quit match. When people say Starrcade, they think of the first one, the Flair race, they think of the Skywalker's match, and then they think of the I Quit cage match. Just kind of talk about the build up to that, and then just kind of talk about the match itself. I know it wasn't a technical wrestling masterpiece, but it was.
No, it was the most violent thing I've ever portrayed, and it was the build up, the 4 or 5 months of build up to the program that we did was something that I don't think could ever be redone today the same way, just because it's a different era. We live in a television land, and for to kind of permeate the culture of everyone getting like very personal about this feud going on between Tully and I. Because first of all, he and Baby Doll form and J.J. Dillon have this alliance that made me lose the title to Tully from Wahoo. I beat Wahoo. I defend the title for a bit, and then I get in this thing with Tully, and they get me basically screwed out of the belt. And Tully's just the quintessential worker heel of all time. I mean, hardest working guy in the ring I've ever been in the ring with. Second to none in terms of intensity. So as him and I build into this feud, and we're interjecting Baby Doll's distractions and her interfacing with this thing and all these things going on, we had 5 months to build to that crescendo where we'd had such violent altercations, everything from me coming in Spartanburg dressed like a policeman, hair all up under the hat and everything, and coming out of nowhere, and leaving him laying in handcuffed to the bottom rope and doing some different things that we did that people really wanted to see this thing come to a conclusion. And they weren't really sure whether somebody's going to get taken out on a stretcher or buried. I mean, it was that intense in their mind. So would anybody ever have that much time to be able to prep and put into an angle for one big blow off match today? Probably not. And I think it met everybody's expectations and exceeded some, and it's really withstood the test of time pretty well to the point where with all the crazy things that have happened over the years with the Cactus Jacks and all the people that went on to have all these outrageous tacks and this and that and the other, the sheer physicality of what we did without jumping off the top rope and going through tables and doing all that stuff still set the flavor and the tempo for what people tried to duplicate over the years.
Was it a chair that you were trying to? It was a piece of a chair. Just kind of talk about the ending of that match, because he never said. Everybody says, "Oh, well, he never said I quit. He just said yes or something."
Well, Tully was great because he knew the conclusion of the match was going to be he was going to drop the belt, but he also knew that it was a very technical thing that he was supposed to say I quit. So the whole deal was his out in his head, and as he still will tell it today, was he didn't ever say I quit. The referee said, "Do you quit?" And he said yes. So technically in his mind he never said I quit, he said yes. But the twist of that match, it was a couple of little things. First of all, I'd never been in a production like that. I never had interests to music and smoke and pyro and all these things that it developed into. And we didn't have walkthroughs before and all the stuff like they do today. So they come out, tell me to step on this mark, and we're going to have our match. And they don't say, and I can't see anything. There's smoke everywhere. They tell me where I'm standing, and I mean, for me, the performance was like a shoot because I was as jacked up adrenaline-wise as if I was getting ready to go out there and square off in the UFC. Because this performance to me always was a performance of a lifetime. So when they said, boom, stand on the spot, well, I hear music playing. Well, nobody's ever told me anything about entrance. All I know is I got to get down there to that ring. So I go barreling through the smoke, through the everything, and they're panning the camera, and Tully's making an entrance. And when the Tully comes up in the ring, it's like I was there by magic. I was standing in the middle of the ring just ready to go, just ready to just jump in the middle of this thing. So I missed all the entrance pieces they had planned, but here we are live in this thing. And the conclusion of the match, Baby Doll's supposed to throw in a chair. Well, we didn't gimmick chairs and do things back then that they later came to do. They throw this old wood folding chair up in the ring, and Tully's supposed to break it and try to use it against me. Well, when he breaks it, it comes off with this thing that looks like a railroad spike. I mean, it's just the nastiest looking thing you've ever seen in your life, with a great big metal bolt on one end and a big long piece of wood. And so that was the piece that he tried to use on me. I turned around, turned it on him, put it up against his head. Looks like I'm about to put his eye out when he relinquished and said yes. So was that
I'm
done.
How it was supposed to go? Or?
That's how it was supposed to go. Yeah, that's how it was supposed to go. We just didn't know we were going to get such a dramatic prop out of that chair that was going to look so horrendous because it just worked out that way.
How does it make you guys feel that you had one of the most classic matches in one of the biggest shows? I mean, in the history of that show, Starrcade's a big show, and most people go, "Oh yeah, it's the I Quit match. That's the biggest remembered match." I mean, how does that make you guys feel that you did that?
I think speaking for myself, it makes me feel great because it's kept me alive in the history of the business. I mean, I was only actively in the ring for 6 years, and out of that 6 years, I was on top for 3 out of the 6, and crammed a lifetime of a career in a very short period of time. And of all the people I had feuds with Flair and Tully and Nikita and last one with Jimmy Garvin, or previously with Wrestling 2 and Ernie Ladd and different folks over the years, for that thing to be the landmark match that it ended up being, I would have not thought that it would end up withstanding the test of time like it did, but it is very flattering.
Okay, let's talk about the Four Horsemen. I mean, they were kind of the villain that kind of made everything click. I mean, they had all you great baby faces to work with. Just kind of talk about them as a group. And most people remember the original with Ole. Just kind of talk about that group and what they kind of meant to Crockett.
Well, they were a cornerstone of everything we did. I mean, Ole Anderson, Arn Anderson, Tully, and Rick. all tremendous hands by themselves, but collectively putting them all together, and the minds and the timing and the things that afforded you, and all the combinations and twists you could take out of that, it gave them unlimited ability to shuffle that deck, have great matches with everybody from Dusty and I to Ricky and Robert. They could mix whatever they needed out of that combination. And at one time they were the World Tag Team Champions, the World Television Champions, and the World Champion. And I mean, and the U.S. Champion. They were everything that you could want to be. Had every accolade, and were so good at their braggadocious commentaries and persona that everybody you either loved them or you hated them. I mean, a lot of people were Horseman fans. I mean, it was kind of interesting, back then, because that's when the first time I ever saw like real heel fans, where it was cool to like the bad guy. So it would be a challenge in different venues, whether I was with never so much with Tully, because Tully, he would get the heat pretty quick and carry it. But Flair was always that back and forth kind of, you loved him one minute, you hated him the next. But he never had ego to want to look like Superman or want to outshine because he was so crafty. He was always good at doing things to make, paint the picture, make himself the heel, have to take the cheap shot, how to take the shortcut, and of course all those guys understood psychology so well. You couldn't lose. You could never have a bad match out of any of that combination whatsoever. And I remember, having 8-man tag matches and stuff, and just like, it was like a night off. It was like a continuous high spot the entire match. And when they got the heat, it was good quick heat. And we had some, fluff finish usually that still left the heat, even if we got a quick 1, 2, 3 on somebody. And we still let them, get the zing on somebody on the way back out. And away we were at it. People still wanted to see it next go round.
You mentioned like fluff finish. People, we've been talking to a lot of guys that work with the Crockett's. They say they use the term dusty finish. I don't know if you've heard that or you know what that means, but what do you?
Well, tell me what they say it means, and I'll tell you.
It was always Dusty would always use it. The ref would go down. He would beat Flair with the ref down. The other one would come down and count the 1, 2, 3 with the other one would come back and say, no, Flair won, you cheated, or he threw him over the top rope. I think you've probably seen it, or you probably used it too.
Oh yeah, I mean, and there's some genius in it, but at some point in time you get to a point where you have to have conclusions. But he did that to get as much elasticity out of the characters and out of what was invested in the people at the time, and it frustrated a lot of people, a lot of times. We had a finish that we did with Tommy Young, where with Flair, that he fooled all the boys. I was working with Rick, and all the guys were watching the match, and they thought Rick had dropped the title to me. I mean, they were going flipping crazy, and it was a swerve, but we kayfabed everybody. Nobody knew what was going on, and Tommy had done this deal where as he climbed over, it was like he was counting 1, 2, 3, but he was really like reaching and pulling himself across. But I had bumped into him previous to that, and he disqualified me, but everybody thought that he was going to raise my hand because I had Flair down and beat. And it was, those things were very creative, but at some point in time, it gets to the point where it gets used too much. It gets a little long in the tooth. And I think that's probably what some of the other guys that went on in 87, 88, 89, 90 after me, probably, maybe got frustrated with. But to the same extent, had he not done what he did, I don't know that they would have got the mileage out of a lot of the angles that they had.
Just kind of tell me how creative Dusty was, and then just talk about the Great American Bash and how successful that was. Because we talked to Ronnie Garvin, and he said they lost a lot of money doing those shows, but I don't see how they were kind of packing those rings. I know maybe if it rained or something, they probably.
Well, I don't know what it cost to put the show on. I mean, looking at it as a businessman today and the talent, when it very first happened, and we had David Allan Coe and all these country music stars trying to mix the two together, I don't think the value add was there from the country music perspective that he thought would be there. And so from that perspective, they probably did lose money, because we'd go in big places like JFK Stadium, and we were in great big venues that could hold 50, 60,000 people. And, you know, you put 10,000 in there or 15,000 in there, it's a good show, a good house, but it's not what it needed to be to support, you know, everything that was on the card. So you know, I know that we hit the ball out of the park, like here in Charlotte, outside, and you know, did some huge numbers in some of them, but probably if you put a pencil to it on the bigger piece of it, you know, Ronnie was probably right.
You were part of the first one in '85 right here in Charlotte.
Right.
Kind of talk about how amazing that was to see 40,000 people in Memorial Stadium, and just kind of like how groundbreaking that was to be doing that kind of business. Because I mean, you couldn't do that today. You probably couldn't put that many people out there.
No, and it was like being part of a rock show. I mean, you know, yeah, we had David Allen Coe out there, and it's raining, and he goes out there and plays Purple Rain, of all things, and the skies open up, the clouds go away, and we end up having this just unbelievable show that's live. And even though it was this great big show, it wasn't like a show that was had any blow-off matches in it at all. It had Nikita against Ric Flair, which had never happened. This was the first time Nikita was being put in that kind of match. It was before his and my deal. I actually wrestled Kamala. I had Kamala come in, and I was the U.S. champion at the time. But there wasn't any it wasn't like the conclusion of a lot of things. It was like this big festive, you know, bunch of matches and great matches, and mixing the country music with it, and a great big festival type atmosphere. But it wasn't like the Starrcades were, where you were really trying to get a conclusion of some big heavy angle or, you know, big heavy deal. So it was very unique.
It sounds like they did lose money from your perspective, but was it smart to take it out of Charlotte and then take it on tour all around? I mean, it probably should have been left alone right here.
You know, in retrospect, I never looked at it like that. I mean, Dusty and I traveled together every day. I saw his vision. I wasn't having to work the dollars and cents of things and travel and all that. I didn't. It was like being on the end of a meteor and this thing just going 5 bajillion miles an hour. I didn't get to, you know, sit and try to figure it out because, again, I was on kind of the front cusp of this. I wasn't there when the big contracts came out. There were, you know, mailbox money every 2 weeks. I had a very nice contract, and I was one of the first 5 people that ever had a contract in the business that guaranteed you any significant money. But it was a guarantee that at the end of the year, you'd make at least X number of dollars. But it was made, still the carrot was out there for you to be able to make 5, 10 times that based on your performance, based on being paid your percentage of the main events from the house shows and all those things. And so I was just, to me, it was all great. You know, I'm making, you know, $5,000, $7,000, $8,000 a week, and to me, you know, I'm in just the land of milk and honey. I've never seen anything like this before in my life.
Well, you said you were a part of hearing Dusty's vision. What was his? What was his vision? Just bigger and bigger and bigger? Or?
Bigger and movies and Hollywood, and I mean he was a guy that envisioned Magnum TA going on into the Hollywood scene, along with not just a step away from wrestling, but what The Rock did, what Stone Cold Steve Austin did. Dusty had that vision for me back in the mid '80s, and you know, for him, I was his quarterback of the team. I was the guy he was vested in. Was he sitting talking to me about psychology every night and those kind of things? No. He was talking about vision and the next step, the next level, things that he envisioned the business doing, you know, coming up with angles and things like that, but always hungry for the next big thing. I mean, he was not tied down to just looking around the room and thinking inside the box and we just got this. He was going down the road many more steps than that, way ahead of his time.
Let's talk about the famous 7-match series with Nikita. Just kind of talk about how that started. I think when you attacked Bob Geigel?
Well, that's not how it started. It started as well, first of all, you know, this was Nikita's first big main event angle, period. And I'd just come off, you know, a big round with Flair and then the big round with Tully. And for the first time in my career, I'm the veteran in the ring, right? I mean, I've been in the business 5.5 years, and now I'm the veteran. I'm usually in the ring with somebody who's got 10 years of experience, and yeah, I'm a contributing part to the game, but I'm not the one dictating the tempo of the match usually. It's the heel leading the match, you know, making sure everybody's taken care of business. Now I'm in there with Nikita Koloff, who's this 285-pound monster, who is the most dedicated guy to his gimmick I've ever met in my life. He's learning how to speak little words of Russian, doesn't kayfabes everybody everywhere he goes, and you know, got everybody on the planet thinking he's this real Russian nightmare. And so we started the angle, and the whole thing started with us just doing a simple signing for it, and them having my mom be there part of it, because we'd brought her in, did a little vignette with her, the wind beneath my wings, and kind of made it, you know, trying to make me this, you know, baby face, you know, image, and a mom that's still believing in her son and his vision, and he was going to be a big star and all these things. So Dusty said, I'm going to incorporate this in. So at the signing, you know, Nikita insults my mom, which my mom knows nothing about is going to happen. She's just sitting there totally unaware, oblivious. She's ready for this whole thing. And next thing she knows, I'm over the table. We're in this big fight. We're in this deal, and she's just reacting. You know, doesn't know what to do. So then, yes, the Bob Geigel thing comes into play. Is he's going to reprimand me for my actions unbecoming or not befitting the U.S. champion. So they had me go up to Kansas City, where you know Bob's at, and he's going to reprimand me, and you know, to add insult to injury, he's going to, you know, publicly call me out, and I pop him. So you know, I'm stone cold 10 years ahead of his time, knocking out the president of the NWA, and I get stripped of the title, basically, that it's going to be held up for the conclusion of the best of 7. And it was a tremendous series, and it was one of my proudest moments in the business, because I had to make sure I was on top of my game. Nikita was great. I mean, he stepped up his game, but we did it together, and we had 30-minute matches, 45-minute matches. It went so well that it didn't end up just being 7 matches. I think we ended up having 10 or 11 that they called the 7. And of course, we worked this great big, you know, this ultimate, you know, screwed over job on the end of it. First of all, I think I was down 3-0 because I just got bing ba bing. So I'm fighting my way back. Finally get it to 3-3 as we go into the last match. So they have Ivan. It took Ivan, Nikita, and Crusher all to finally beat me in the last match. But it was brilliant, and it was very well done. And he was the most heated heel in the country at the time, not because he was the most talented heel, but he was the most convincing, ferocious animal anybody had ever seen, and we'd made him that through that series. And I was very proud of those matches.
So you kind of felt like you had his career in your hands with somebody's got.
Well, I felt like I had both of our careers in our hands, because it was the first chance I had to prove myself that I could be the general, that I could lead something. And that's a role that if you have any aspirations of being the world champion, you better be able to be a general and better be able to go out there with a broomstick if necessary and have a great match. So it was a great challenge, and I was, you know, happy to be part of the whole thing.
And after that, you were moved on. I think you're going to be going into a program of Flair. I think someone said there was a secret meeting you had with Dusty and Crockett about that, or
well, we
in New York, or you might
yeah, no, I don't. We'd flown up to New York, and they had, and back then they, you know, it was territories, so they had to have a meeting with all the different owners of the territories that vote and support decisions that were being made. And from what I'm told, I wasn't part of that meeting, but what I was told was that the agreement had been made, and that they were ready to, you know, cast their lot for me and give me the opportunity to be the flagship and to take that next step, you know, meet Flair for the title, take on the title. And at that time, I don't think that would have made me the youngest world's heavyweight champion of all time, but it would have certainly have made me one of the quickest to be able to escalate to that level and have that opportunity. So in the interim between taking a little bit of a break between the intensity of what I'd just come off with with Nikita. I was a little program with Jimmy Garvin, who just bounced in and it was just kind of a fun. He was flamboyant and a great friend of mine to this day, and his wife Patty. So we were in the midst of this little thing that was going to be my next step to going back against Flair for the world title.
Okay, I guess you had your car accident right after that.
It wasn't too long into the program with Jimmy. I actually had my last match was in Greenville, South Carolina, and it was a lumberjack match with Jimmy Garvin. And on the way back from there, that's when I had the career-ending automobile wreck.
You mind just kind of talking about that?
No, not at all. I had a little 911 turbo Porsche. It was like my dream car. I'd always wanted it from the time I was a kid. And I'd only had it a couple months, and I was driving back, and 5 minutes from my house, hydroplaned on a wet road, skipped off the road broadside at a telephone pole, running 50 miles an hour, suffered a C5 compression fracture of my neck and was paralyzed instantly from the neck down. Told that I'd never do anything but sit up and be fed in a wheelchair for the rest of my life, but by the grace of God, I sit here today, and they were wrong.
And I guess we did stories back then, and I looked through our old archives, and they talk about all the cards and all the flowers and all the phone calls you got. Just kind of talk about, I guess you didn't know then at the time because you were dealing with what you were dealing with, but just kind of talk about knowing now all the support and how much it really meant to people back then.
It was really overwhelming because we were wrestling 7 days a week, and twice on Sundays, sometimes twice on Saturdays, twice during the week when we were doing other things. So you could wrestle 10, 11 times in a week. So life on the road was hard, very intense. I was watching the media we were on and all the the attendance in the arenas, but I wasn't really getting the impact that we were having on the fan. Because in those days we did the personalized interviews for the towns. We didn't ever just stand in the middle of a ring and talk off into nothing. We were right eyeball to eyeball in the camera. We were very personalized with people, and therefore all these thousands and thousands and thousands of fans felt like they were personally involved in our lives. So when this happened, first of all, initially they didn't know whether it was real or an angle. I had people thought the Andersons had sabotaged my car, and I was going to be back at the next match, and all this stuff. But it was so surreal because I'm in ICU, in bad shape. They don't even know if I'm gonna make it. I'm on a respirator, it's all fouled up, and they've got security there. I had to put security at the Carolinas Medical, and around the clock. They got people camped out on, the lawn, and they had to put on operators, answer the phones, and just really crazy stuff. And after I got through the first 30 days in ICU, and people were able to start communicating to me, and I had to have a security guard outside my door to keep fans from just trying to come in and wander in the room. It was humbling, and at the same time, because of the emotional side of what I'm going through. I'm in a roller coaster. I'm 27 years old. I'm in the fight of my life to disprove all the experts, to say I'm never going to walk again. You don't know, even if I do walk, what that'll mean. What will I really be able to do? Future's all up in the air. Don't know, what's going to happen next. Got that going on. Thinking about the impact I'm having on people, and now I'm going to, here I've portrayed this bigger than life, John Wayne, Clint Eastwood, whatever you want to call it, good guy for these people with a strong work ethic and a nature that I'm not going to be defeated. And now they're looking at this being real life. And if I fold and I crack, all these people that are watching me are going to crack with me. They're going to be, they're going to be overwhelmed too. And for the first time, I realize I've got now it's all real. And yeah, I've impacted hundreds of thousands of people, and they're watching to see how I'm going to deal with this catastrophic, incident in my life. What am I going to do? And it was pretty big.
Talked to Jackie Crockett, and kind of on a lighter note, he said he was there, around the clock sometimes, and a lot of guys would come by, and he said one of the nurses, they didn't know how you were going to be, but this is kind of, you don't have to answer this question or not, but Just wanted to kind of get your response. He said one of the nurses was giving you a sponge bath, and he's
The worm.
he called it the Cyclops. or the
Yeah, I know. I heard that story. Yeah, He ran out and told everybody that. Well, he told everybody the worm was still alive or something, just to let them know that I was making a comeback and that my parts were starting to work again, and Jackie, bigger than life personality. Only he could get away with saying something like that, and you still smile about it afterwards. But yeah, Jackie was there a lot. As a matter of fact, I was on this rotokinetic bed that rotated back and forth 45 degrees, constant, nonstop, because I'm paralyzed, trying to keep blood clots from settling in. Well, they rigged up a TV for me that went around and hung. It was suspended with the bed, and it went with me. And he had it all rigged up so it'd work on satellite, and I got cable feeds, and I had all this stuff going on in the hospital. I mean, they came and figured all this stuff out, and they did everything they could to really, try to make it as good as it could be under a horrendous situation. Ric Flair came in and laid the world's heavyweight title on my chest when I was still in ICU. And he said, "I'm laying this on your chest right now, and when you come out, you come take it from me in the ring." And he left it with me, and the original, world's heavyweight title belt. So I mean, a rally of my peers and my friends and the fraternity that I was part of was huge, but it was definitely one of the toughest times of my life.
And obviously, you not knowing what's going on, but I guess you could see it on the TV. But and it might be a little cold-hearted for people not inside wrestling to know, but the show has to go on.
Absolutely.
And so now, I guess back then you didn't know, but now you know Nikita took your spot.
Oh, I watched it.
Oh, you did?
Yeah.
Just kind of
Oh, well, no, they talked to me about it. Dusty talked. Yeah, I mean, and it was brilliant, and I supported it. I mean, it was the absolute right thing to do. The impact that there could have never been a time in the history of the wrestling business, I don't think, that a heel has become a babyface under a more dramatic set of circumstances, because it was real life. I mean, it was a shoot, and you couldn't recreate that for $1 billion for somebody to really go through the intensity of what he and I just had take place. Then that very person that he defeats, go down and have him have a complete change of heart and come out, then the monster becomes the friend. I mean, it was priceless. I mean, I don't think I don't know what's happened in the history of wrestling that can compare to that one moment in time, and something that I'm sure that had to be one of the biggest impact things that ever happened to him.
Right. I skipped over one of the events Dusty created. You actually went to the finals of the Crockett Cup. What did you think of the Crockett Cup as an event? Wasn't that in New Orleans?
Yeah, well, two things with that. So with the Crockett Cup that I wrestled in was with Ronnie Garvin, and Dusty and I were supposed to be partners in that. And at the last minute, I don't remember the exact reasoning for it, but they decided to put a main event in with Dusty and Rick, and put Ronnie in with me. And then Ronnie and I worked our way to the finals with the Road Warriors, and the Road Warriors win the cup. But it was a really great. All those big show things are great ideas till you figure out that you've put so much there, so many people, that the reason we're all over is because we can all go out there and have 30-minute matches, 45-minute matches, do all these things that when you put them all together, now you're compressed for time. And now you only got 5 minutes, 8 minutes, 12 minutes to compress everything you know how to do, and maybe multiple times in the event of these tournaments. So I think it was a good concept, but I don't think they really had the time to showcase it, what it really could have been. Something like that really should have been a multiple day event or something to do it justice, so that it wouldn't look contrived. Because, I mean, you got Ronnie and I wrestling Tiger Mask, and I think we were in there with Tiger Mask, and I can't remember who it was. But, I mean, great talent. I mean, he was a huge talent from Japan, and we had like less than 6 or 7 minutes to go out there and throw this match in there and move on to the next one. So sometimes those big things like that didn't really get to showcase everybody the way they should. fans really got a lot of excitement. But if I was like a Meltzer sitting back critiquing matches and stuff like he did, I would have picked them to pieces, because I said, well, a lot of great guys there, but they didn't really nobody really showed their hand, what they're really capable of doing, because we got a window to do this thing, and bing, bang, boom, and they got to get the next one in, because we got to shut the lights down at 11 o'clock tonight.
And you guys, lost, I think it was the Road Warriors?
Yeah. Yeah.
Talk about them as a talent. What you thought of those guys?
Oh, I love both of them. My probably as I was breaking in the business, they were two guys that I was more fascinated with than anybody, because I liked the Road Warrior gimmick. I was a fan of the Mel Gibson movies and the whole deal, and they were so ferocious and just devastating to the guys in the ring that even guys that walk the street that may not like wrestling or anything else, you see Hawk and Animal, 285 and 320 pounds, knocking a guy, and he's cutting a triple somersault. They're, hitting him so hard. They made believers out of people. And I'll never forget, the first time I had the opportunity to work with them, Jim Duggan and I were the tag team champions for Bill. And so Jim's a pretty good sized fellow too. And back in those days when somebody came into the territory, the heels and babyface dressing rooms were totally separate. You didn't get a chance to go meet, high five, talk to anybody, nothing. First time you saw them was when you walked in the ring that night. So Jim and I had watched them work a few times and said, well, they're two of the stiffest son of a guns I've ever seen in my life. We were so intent on the fact that we weren't going to get beat up that we ended up just being so over the top with them that it was horrible. I mean, we were just stiff. We were just like they were, the job guys on TV. And when we finally got to get together afterwards, they laughed. They said, yeah, it's great to see two guys like us, stiff, because we had just had this false expectation that they were, because, we were watching work with job guys. We hadn't seen them work with main eventers. And they were great guys. They were a great asset to the business, and they were way ahead of their time. So when Ronnie and I ended up working with them in the main event, and Ronnie dropped the fall to one of them, it was very professional. It was great, and they were definitely, as far as impact on the business, I don't know if a tag team in the history of the business had more impact than those two guys. Because tag teams, great guys like Arn and Tully, two of the best workers ever, to be a tag team. They never get the attention that the singles matches gets, the single stars. But Animal and Hawk, they took it to a different level, and they were like, when Road Warriors came to town and you heard that music, if you didn't get goosebumps, you were dead.
Yeah. And you talked about real life moments the following year at the Crockett Cup. You kind of made your first appearance and walked to the ring.
Yeah.
After your friends went and won the tournament for you. Just kind of tell us about that night, what you remember that night. It was real for the fans too.
Yeah, it was, and it was really emotional for me. I mean, it was, I got out of the hospital 5 months after the accident. Accident was in October. What you remember what month that cup was in Baltimore? I'm not even sure.
It been like August.
Yeah, so it was probably about 10 months after the accident, and I'm walking with the cane, and but to walk out there in front of, that was a sold out arena, and they were the place was on fire, and it was one of the most emotional things I've ever been involved in. The love, the outpouring from the fans, the genuine, concern for them, and I think it was a double thing. I think everybody was so cheering for me to make a comeback. Because that's what you want. You want your hero to make that babyface to make that comeback, and though it wasn't the comeback everybody wanted to see, myself included, from what it could have been, and what it was forecasted and told by the experts, me being able to walk back down that arena and stand down there on that floor and talk to anybody on a microphone was nothing short of a miracle, the equivalent of the Red Seas parting, because it was never, ever, ever slated that I'd be able to do anything. My spine was in such devastation. I couldn't move anything but my head, and that was all it was. So the fact that I was able to get there was just such a blessing. And if it inspired somebody to overcome and to see that I really wasn't a quitter and that I really was an overcomer, and that there is no obstacle too great that by the grace of God you can overcome if if you're steadfast in your pursuit, then then that reached a whole lot more people than any match or any NWA world title or anything else that I could have attained. And that's my place in history.
Okay. And did you work in the office for Crockett, or was that just WCW?
WCW.
You didn't work in the Crockett office?
No.
Well, I guess probably so. You were there, though. Did you see any of the signs that they were going to eventually run out of money and have to sell to Turner? Did you see any of that? And if you did, just kind of tell us what you saw and what was going on.
I saw them panic from a bedside. I watched two things. And during that 5 months I was in the hospital, I watched the shows every week. They brought me the tapes from the pay-per-views. And all of a sudden I see, Barry Windham come back, and I see Lex Luger, and I see Sting, and I see the Steiner brothers, and I see people coming. And then I find out that they changed their whole, they had no plan B. I was plan A. Okay, Magnum's going to go do this with Flair. We're going to keep doing what we're doing, and there we're going to go. And all of a sudden, Magnum goes down. Well, as big an impact as Nikita made the switch, Nikita wasn't in a place to step into that role. Okay, that's a little different deal. You can showcase and work around a lot of things where somebody doesn't have the right amount of experience, but you can't put the strap on the guy that's going to carry the company and think he's going to be able to be successful. So again, they bring all these people in, but they change their whole thought process from a guarantee to keep the carrot, to keep the performance thing out there. They're so afraid they're going to lose people to New York that they guarantee these horrendous salaries to Luger, to the Road Warriors, to all these guys. Now all of a sudden they've got a huge nut that sink or swim they've got to meet every 2 weeks. And I was smart enough to know that we've all got to be inspired to do our best, be our best. Part of the fun of being a main eventer was to see that payoff every week. When you got that check and see that big payoff for the $100,000 house you were on and what you contributed and seeing that reward because of your performance. Well, even as great as it was to get, a $5,000, $7,000, a $10,000 check, if you didn't have in the back of your mind that check could also be a $20,000 or a $30,000 check based on being part of something bigger yet, the incentive, the being able to reach for the brass bell as a performer is taken away. So when they put these, amazing contracts in people's hands to give them security and think that they were ensuring this great workforce, they put handcuffs on everybody. And they also took away the incentives to go out there and have the best match of the night and to be the next superstar of superstars, because you wanted to be the world champion, because back then it was a shoot. You got 10% of the gate. It was 13% total, 3% went to the NWA, 10% went in your pocket. So you're on a $100,000 house, 10 grand. Flair had his first $100,000 month against me. I had a great month too, but my great month was like 20 grand and his was 100 grand. So there was incentive to be the world's champion, right? Well, they took all that away with that contract philosophy change. And panicking and not looking at the model and kind of seeing it through to what's going to happen if we do all this and really have an impact on, what does this mean to us financially, with the travel, the investment, all the things we got. That's what they couldn't see. And they couldn't see outside the box that Vince saw of reaching out and grabbing the non-traditional wrestling fan and making them fans through capturing the kids on a huge way with Hogan and the things that he did and the toys and the things that made the kids tied to this and all the things that we made little of is what made him grow completely outside of anything we ever thought of. We painted, just like we thought he was painting himself in a box with entertainment, we were doing the same thing with violence, because we were getting to a point where the violence, how far can you go with the violence? What can you do short of really burying somebody? And where can you go with this? So, Vince had the right idea and the right concept, and also, took it to another venue to a whole greater level than what the Crockett model had the capability of it. And that's why, you know, I was told numbers of like $7 million in unsecured debt when they sold out to Turner Broadcasting. And it was a shame because it was a mismanaged thing. I don't think out of stupidity or out of ignorance, but just out of lack of resource for something got too big, too fast for them to get the right consultant type people to come in and show them how to, you know, take it to that next level.
So I've asked this question, everybody, who's to blame for that happening? I've heard I've got the accountant, I've got Jimmy Crockett, I've got Dusty Rhodes, I've got a lot of different.
Well, I go like this because now I've been involved in a lot of deals. Okay, at the end of the day, it's really got to lay on the head of the company. Okay, and I love Jimmy Crockett. Jimmy gave me my opportunity, but at the end of the day, he's the one that's got to look himself in the mirror and say, I lost my family's company, because whether he got sold a bad bill of goods, whether the accountant did this, or whether he stayed too long believing in Dusty or whatever, he's still, at the end of the day, the one the stockholders, the family, everybody looks to make the right decision. And unfortunately, he, maybe got sold some bad bills of goods, but you've got to do your own checks and balances when you're sitting at the helm of something that probably at its peak was generating. If it did 27 million in '86, I would say with the pay-per-view things and things that happened after that, subsequent to that, it had to push north of $50 million at some point in time in that game. Maybe 100 million. I don't know what the number was, but with great wealth and with great great power comes great responsibility. And unfortunately, the guy that sits in that seat has to belly up and say, I should have made some different choices.
Do you think they should have focused on this area, this little southeastern part, and stopped worrying about Vince? Do you think they might have still been?
Oh, no, they'd have lost it all. Vince would have swallowed them up whole, spit them out the other end. If they hadn't gone head-to-head with Vince, they'd have been out of the game, quicker than, just like, because we would have all left, first of all. If it had just stayed this little island and Vince is out there conquering the world, every single one of us were business people, okay? That call would have come. We'd had a chance to be international stars, not just stars in the Mid-Atlantic, and the handwriting would have been on the wall.
Well, with everything that did happen, not staying here and going national, did you ever consider going to work for Vince? Never
had that conversation. Really? And very loyal to my core of people that I work with and help bring me to the dance. But if it ever came a matter of the opportunity had shifted, and I saw them like kind of painted in a corner, and I knew that there was something bigger out there, because again, my aspiration wasn't just to be a wrestler. I mean, I was interested in Hollywood. I was interested in NASCAR. I drove a Winston Cup car at Charlotte Motor Speedway, and loved it. And it was back before when Tim Richmond was still living, and they were looking for other crossover people to bring into racing. I was very interested in that. Again, I was 27. I didn't envision actively being in wrestling past 30 years old. I wanted to take it to another level, to another thing. And, had I seen that Vince was edging up in the game and moving forward and yielding greater opportunities, and, even if I was making $1 million working for, Company A, it would have been something I would have had to give in consideration to as a business person.
Well, how will you remember that era, that Jim Crockett era? How will you remember it, and how should the fans remember it?
To me, it was, one of the biggest building blocks in what we have today, because it was the only grassroots organization that stepped up to try to take it head-to-head competition on a national level, and it was a rich heritage. The promotions had been around for 50 years. And covered a wide berth of states, and had a wide array of talent, and people from George Scott booking it to Dory Funk Jr. Different people over the years, but there's been no greater talent pool, I don't think, in the industry than came through here. And you know, if it had stayed, if it had gone on a linear track, just like Vince was able to do, you have no doubt that the Roddy Pipers and the Jimmy Snukas and those people would have circled right back around. But again, we were all in this knowing we have a certain shelf life, certain window of performance. And back in that day, you know, a 35-year-old to 40-year-old was old in the business. You were a real old timer then. I mean, you know, it was a young man's sport. I mean, they were wanting Rick to transition him to what they called the Jack Nicklaus role in the business in 1986. Now, obviously, we really laugh at that today as Rick's still bouncing around in 2013, maybe not bouncing very high, but still bouncing. And, you know, obviously the longevity of people's careers was totally underestimated back then, or the audience that would still find interest in these characters. But, you know, again, real talent that had the ability to improvise and do the live things we did in the ring is almost a dead art. And I don't know whether they'll get an opportunity to get that back because of the change in the culture in the business or not.
So we're looking back on it now. What was Jim Crockett Promotions to you?
To me, it was a vehicle that allowed me to take the main event character that I developed for Bill Watts and Bill Watts' territory to the national level. I didn't know that when I stepped out in faith that that's where I was going to go and give it the opportunity. For me, it was a dream to be able to go back to my roots into Tidewater, to Norfolk Scope, to be able to wrestle there in front of my parents, my grandparents, my friends, in a very respectable level. Instead of starting out there, had I started there and been a jobber and had to work my way up through the ranks, you know, I never had to experience any of that in my home. And it was, for me, it was that opportunity. And the highlight of my career, way aside from the I Quit match, which got all the notoriety, was wrestling Norfolk Scope, both granddaddies up in the stands, mom and dad, sold-out arena, Ric Flair, world heavyweight title inside a steel cage, 60 minutes. Will never be any better than that for me. The fans on fire. We held the indoor attendance arena for that building to this day. And, you know, that is a kid's dream, to be able to wrestle for the world title in front of friends and family in a sold-out arena and knock it out of the park.
Ask this to everybody. You got a good Ric Flair story for us?
More Ric Flair story. You know, Rick was a lot of fun, and you know, he was just the biggest partier outside of the ring environment and what he did in that ring. He was just big in life outside the ring as he was in. He never quit being Ric Flair. Probably one of the most horrendous things that really erupted into something chaotic was after one of those Great American Bashes, we had the biggest food fight in the Sheraton in Richmond, Virginia, brand spanking new hotel with all the guys in there. And Rick started this little food fight with Animal, or no, it was Hawk, that erupted into the biggest mess and about $30,000 worth of water damages, I was later told. And Rick and I and Dusty somehow got tagged with it and were all barred from the hotel. But again, he was just, you know, bigger than life, fun, you know, really enjoyed the camaraderie, I think as much, if not more so, than the performance in the ring. And, you know, that's the takeaway. We were like this big brotherhood, and we were in this little secret organization that we all shared in, but we all loved what we did. We all, you know, made good money and got to enjoy a life, you know, bigger than all outdoors. And we lived on the road together, you know, pretty much 300 some days a month, you know, a year we were out on the road with this group, so they were our family.